This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's March 28th, 2025. On this day in 1988, the University of Tennessee women's basketball team won its first ever NCAA championship. That was the first of 8 national titles for the Lady Vols. Since the first tournament back in 1982, they've made it to the Final Four 19 times and to the championship game 13 times. Before that tourney existed, there was the AIAW, Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, and they made that Final Four several times too. Unfortunately, they didn't make it that far either of the times that the finals were held in Tennessee, Knoxville in 1990, Nashville in 2014. Right now, we're in the midst of March Madness, and the Tennessee women play in the Sweet 16 round tomorrow. The game against Texas starts at 2:30. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with some historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. It's always exciting to see the UT women do well, but a little bittersweet to see them without the legendary Pat Summitt pacing alongside the court in a pantsuit. She basically created the Lady Vols, after all. Patricia Head, later Summitt, grew up here in Middle Tennessee. Born in Clarksville, raised on her family's farm. Her dad put a basketball hoop on the barn, and she learned how the game was played when she was 6. By the time she was a teenager, she was such a good player that the family moved a little farther south to Cheatham County so that she could play on a high school team. This was before Title IX. Schools didn't have to have girls' sports, and plenty didn't. Cheatham County High did. According to the UT website, she was named most popular and the basketball sweetheart of her graduating class. And fun fact, they also called her Trish, not Pat. She went on to play for the University of Tennessee, but not at the main campus in Knoxville. She went to UT Martin out in West Tennessee. The year before she graduated, 1973, she made the national team and represented the U.S. at the World University Games, which were played in the Soviet Union. That whet her appetite for international play, and she set her sights on making the Olympics. For that, she needed to be able to keep practicing, keep focusing on the game. That's when she made the move to UT's flagship campus and started on a master's degree. As a graduate teaching assistant, she was made coach of the school's team. And if that doesn't tell you everything about how little people cared about women's sports then. I mean, seriously, a 22-year-old grad student was the head coach. The admins who approved that hire had no idea what a fateful choice they'd made. She was both excited and terrified, so blown away by the opportunity that she didn't bother to correct her bosses when they called her Pat instead of Trish. As a rookie coach, she led her team to a 16-8 record in their first season, then earned her own spot on the national team for the Pan American Games. Next year, another season with 16 UT wins. And then she didn't just make the Olympic team, she was co-captain when the U.S. won silver in Montreal. That was the highlight of her playing career. From that point on, coaching took center stage. And as great a record as the team had had those first 2 years, for the rest of her career, they would never post fewer than 20 wins in any given season. That's counting her last season, after she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She definitely wasn't her normal self anymore, but even then, the Lady Vols finished 27-9. Over her career, the team posted 1,098 wins and only 208 losses. Now, I'm not usually a fan of girls or women's teams being called the Lady Whatevers. Most of the time, it's said in a way that makes it clear folks think they're less than the male option. The big exception for me is the UT women's team. Because I grew up in Tennessee during the 80s and the 90s when the Lady Vols were one of the nation's elite teams, and the UT men's basketball team was not doing so hot. The way we used the words then, once the basketball season started, Lady Vols meant the good team. And just plain Vols? Actually, I was going to say it meant the lesser of the two, but honestly, I only ever heard people say Vols if they were talking about football. Sorry to all the guys who played basketball then, but you know it. Thompson Bowling Arena was Pat's house, where the men's team also got to play. When my brother-in-law graduated UT back in 1999, I remember sitting in there looking at all the retired jerseys and championship banners, Lady Vols, Lady Vols, Lady Vols. It truly was the rare collegiate sports venue that stood as a temple to the women's team. So yeah, for UT, that lady moniker feels like a strong badge of honor. Pat Summitt's Lady Vols were just amazing. I'll put it this way. She coached the team for almost 4 decades, and in that time, everyone who played a full 4 years for her played in the Final Four at some point. That's tremendous on its own. And every single one of them finished their degree. She had a 100% graduation rate. Because as much of a taskmaster as she was on the court, she was never the kind of coach who thought the sport was more important than the education. As important, sure, but not more important. Oh, and she coached the Olympic team too. Of course she did. A couple of times. Pat Summitt died 9 years ago. But even though she's been gone for a while at this point, I think she deserves some of the credit for the success this winter of the Athletes Unlimited season played here in Nashville. She taught Tennesseans to love and respect women's basketball. The very strong tradition at Vanderbilt, of course, plays a role in that too. And when the player-centered off-season league for WNBA players and hopefuls played its 6-week season here, they did really well. Athletes Unlimited made about 77% more money in Nashville than it had in its previous 3 basketball seasons. More tickets sold, more merch purchased, social media engagement was up too. Shortly before the season wrapped up at the start of this month, the league announced it will stay in Nashville. And not long before the AU started playing here, a move was made to try and bring the big league here as well. A group of investors made a formal bid to the WNBA. The list of backers includes one of Pat Summitt's star players, former Lady Vol Candace Parker. She's joined by one-time UT quarterback Peyton Manning, country stars Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, and former Governor Bill Haslam and his wife Chrissy. They're hoping to establish a new team in Nashville starting in the 2028 season. And they've already picked out a name that reinforces the idea that this place is a natural home for women's basketball. The Summitts, a direct homage to Pat herself. During her life, Pat Summitt won a lot of awards. She was named to the Basketball Hall of Fame the first year that she was eligible, a dozen years before her retirement. Sporting News named her one of the 50 greatest coaches of all time. That's of any sport, leading male or female teams. She was Sports Illustrated's Sportswoman of the Year. When she made it known that dementia was setting in at an early age, a lot of efforts were made to let Pat Summitt know just how loved and respected she was while she could still understand the honors. Awards that often come years after retirement were showered on her in quick succession. The Billie Jean King Legacy Award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Streets were named for her. Multiple basketball courts were named for her. She's the only person to be the namesake of 2 Division I courts, as a matter of fact. And honestly, I'm barely scratching the surface of the honors and acknowledgments that were heaped on her. But I can't help think that she'd be more excited than anything by a pro-women's team named the Summitts. In just a few minutes, drama at the statehouse as legislators talk about gun laws. That's coming up after the newscast.
You've got a lot of things to keep track of. Work schedules, family activities, the ever-growing list of things you need to remember to do. Updating the credit card or banking information for your sustaining membership may have slipped your mind. With just 2 minutes of your time, you can update your payment information and check one more thing off your list. Peace of mind for you, funding for your public radio station. Go online to WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Metro Nashville schools expect to receive more than $97 million in federal funding for the fiscal year 2026. The greatest share will go to schools with a majority of low-income students and schools at the greatest risk of not meeting the state's academic standards. There's also funding for programs that help students with disabilities, for career preparation programs, and expanding community learning centers. A spokesperson for the school says local governments rely on federal funds and that these figures are only a projection. The actual funding may change based on various factors, potential cuts to federal funding by the Trump administration among them. School counselors can provide students with unbiased advice and catch red flags among high-risk kids. But in Tennessee, the average counselor is juggling over 400 students. That's nearly double the recommended number. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports on how overloading counselors can hurt students.
Lower graduation rates, decreased college enrollment, and increased suicidal ideation. The American School Counseling Association says that those are some of the issues facing students who don't have regular access to a school counselor. And in Tennessee, there's a statewide shortage. Amy Baltimore of the Tennessee School Counselors Association.
So being visible and present and available when you have a caseload of 700 students is impossible.
The association recommends a student-to-counselor ratio of 250 to 1. Davidson County's student-to-school counselor ratio is 300 to 1, and counselors in surrounding counties fare even worse. Pipeline, professionalism, and pay are the three main factors driving the lack of counselors, according to Baltimore.
There's really no direct pathway from high school to school counselor.
Counselors can also change the way a student thinks about their future. Former Middle Tennessee school counselor Kelly Pekavish says that an effective counselor can tell a student about a scholarship or Pell Grant if they think college is too expensive for them.
But if a kid doesn't have someone in their corner talking through the various options with them, we are going to see in the state of Tennessee a huge influx of low-income and minority students going to the military.
She says that those students are most underserved at schools with high counselor-to-kid ratios. Her former students still reach out to her for advice years later about navigating the real world. That's why she says the relationship is so critical. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
The tech company Oracle is on track to employ more than 1,000 people in Nashville this year. The software giant is planning to move its world headquarters here, and it's pledged to create 8,500 jobs in Nashville by the end of 2031. The Nashville Business Journal reports the company has also spent some $60 million to buy more property on Nashville's East Bank. Oracle paid $250 million 4 years ago for 65 acres for its new campus there. How much do you need to earn in order to be considered middle class in the volunteer state? A study from a financial tech company has found some sobering answers. Tennessee is among the states with the lowest middle-income salaries. As of 2023, you're right in the middle if you make $67,600. The low end of being middle class is making $45,000. The upper end, $135,000. Tennessee ranked behind Mississippi, West Virginia, and Louisiana. The state with the highest threshold was Massachusetts, with salaries between $66,000 and about $200,000 to be middle class. Nashville artist Annie DeRusso has been a part of the indie music scene since she came here as a student at Belmont. She says she's witnessed the music landscape change from a boys' club to something far more inclusive, and to her, that's exciting.
I remember when I first got to Belmont, I really couldn't get on a show unless it was girls only, and now it actually feels like much the opposite, which is kind of the best thing ever. Anytime I feel like a lineup's announced, it's almost always just girls. Okay, that rocks.
DeRusso is WNXP's Nashville Artist of the Month for March. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Gun bills were heard in the Tennessee State House this week. WPLN's Paige Flager says tensions boiled over between Republicans and Democrats.
Appreciate the conversation and discussion, because that's what democracy requires.
The day got off to a rocky start in the Criminal Justice Subcommittee when Representative Justin Pearson introduced a bill to repeal permitless carry.
And since this bill has been passed, against the will of our chiefs of police, against the will of our sheriffs, we have seen a sad increase in the number of homicides and suicides as well.
It's personal for Pearson, who just returned to session after spending time in Memphis with his family. His brother recently shot and killed himself. But Pearson's proposal was overshadowed by needling from Republican Andrew Farmer.
With regards to your remarks, you talk about, we need to be heard, democracy, and all this. I know every member in this committee's been here this year working during committee, during session, voting on bills.
Yes, sir.
And I know you may have some things going on, but you have not. So I don't think it's fair for you to come in front of this committee and lecture us on hard work and convictions and hard work for our committee.
Thank you, Chair Farmer, for your comments. They incense me, not just because of the lack of regard, but the disrespect and the same denigrating tone that you used on the State House floor when the vote to expel me happened. It is a pathetic excuse for you to not answer the question of why we are doing nothing about the gun violence epidemic. But let me explain to you what I have been doing, Representative, since you asked. My brother, Temperance Darnell Pearson, one of the loves of my life, passed away from gun suicide on December 1st of 2024. And since that happened, it shattered my family like gun violence has shattered so many families.
This heated interaction is representative of the broader frustrations from Democrats who have been pushing for gun reform for years, only to be stymied by the Republican supermajority. Pearson's bill did not pass out of subcommittee. Bills that did loosened gun restrictions, like a proposal by Representative Rusty Grills to expand permitted handgun carry to include any type of firearm, including long guns.
So I'm here today to try my best to protect the rights that our founding fathers gave us.
Notably, one Democrat's gun proposal did pass. Representative Shondell Brooks introduced a bill named after her son, Aquila Da Silva, who was killed in the Waffle House shooting in 2018.
My son, Aquila, would still be here with us today if the parents of the perpetrator had followed the instructions of law enforcement and medical professionals who deemed their son unfit to possess a firearm.
The bill would punish people who sell or give guns to someone who they know has been in a mental institution within the last 5 years. Illinois had a similar law in 2018, which allowed law enforcement to charge the Waffle House shooter's father for allowing him to have access to guns. If that gun transfer had happened in Tennessee, Brooks said there would not have been a way to hold the father responsible.
This bill is about upholding the law and holding those who break the law accountable. I would ask for a favorable vote in honor of Aquila.
And Republicans on the subcommittee, including Andrew Farmer and William Lamberth, gave her that favorable vote. This is just one step for these proposals. The Senate is slated to hear gun bills next week. Paige Flager, WPLN News.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up next week.